My name is Suzanne Slade, and I'm a children's author. And you're in my dining room where I do my work, where I do my writing. And I have a friend here of mine. This is my dog, Corduroy. I thought you might want to say hi to Corduroy. Kids often love to see him, and I can't take him to real school visits. But when I do virtual visits like this, Corduroy gets to say hello. He likes seeing lots of kids. I know, isn't he the cutest dog in the world? Well, I think so. Well, anyway, I'm so glad you've joined me today, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how I became an author, because that's a question that kids ask me more than anything else. Now, the answer to this question is a little long because it took me a long time to become an author, but I can make it kind of short, so here we go. So my story of how I became an author began way back in ancient times, back when I was in first grade. And I want to show you a story I wrote then. I want you to take a close look at this story and think about this. Do you think this story is neat, or do you think it's a little bit sloppy? Yes, let's be honest. The story is a little bit sloppy, and if you were to read it, you'd see there are 22 words I spelled wrong. So I like to show this story to show you that I did not start out as the best writer in the class. I had to work hard when I wrote, but I was a huge reader, and I loved to read. So the next part of my story of becoming an author happened when I was in fourth grade, and my teacher, Mrs. Ober, said, "Your assignment is to write a letter to your favorite author." Now, like I said, I was a huge reader, so I had to think, and after much thought, I decided I would write a letter to Miss Beverly Cleary. I bet you know Beverly Cleary. I bet you've read some of her books, but my favorite book of hers was The Mouse and the Motorcycle. It was so fun. So anyway, I wrote a letter to Beverly Cleary, and this is before the days when authors had websites and you could type them up in email. So I got out a pen and paper and I wrote a letter. I put a stamp on it and I put it in the mail to Beverly Cleary, and I waited and waited, and would you believe I got this letter back? And this is a picture of Beverly Cleary back in ancient times. This was the letter she sent me, and this told all about her and how she became a writer. And on the back side of the paper, it listed the books she'd written and awards she'd won, but the really cool part was right here. And that's where Beverly Cleary herself wrote me a note. So I was so excited to get this letter from her, and I couldn't believe that this busy, famous author had time to write to me. And this said to me several things. It said, one, authors are like real people, and they care about the kids that read their books. And it also let me know that authors are really cool. And so I think in the back of my mind, I thought someday I might want to become an author. Well, as it happened, I went on to high school and to college, and I actually studied math and science in college. I studied engineering because those were my favorite subjects in school. As we noticed, I was not the best writer when I started out. And then after I got out of college, I worked for a while on rockets and on cars, and then I got married and I had 2 children. And I found out how busy little kids can be. Now, I don't know how you are, but when my kids were small, they were really busy. Like my daughter was always climbing trees, and my son was making messes. And so I thought, what's something we could do where we could just kind of relax and take a break, because mamas get tired. So then I remembered how much I loved children's books when I was young. So I went to the library and I got stacks of books. And what I got them were picture books. And you know, picture books are the fun kind of books with lots of cool illustrations inside. And I got them books about an aardvark named Arthur. And this was before Arthur had his own television show. And I read them Berenstain Bear books and Curious George books and lots of other books, and we had the best time. And that's when it happened. That's when I realized, I remembered how much I loved children's books, and that's when I thought, I would really love to write children's books. So this was something new for me. I had not studied writing in college, and I thought, now how am I going to become a writer? But you know, whenever you want to learn something new, the best place to do that is school, right? So I went back to school at night, and I took a class called Writing Books for Children. and I started working on a story. I worked really hard on this story, and the teacher in the class read it, and the other people in the class read it, and they all gave me ideas for how I could change my story to make it better. And so I worked on the story, and so finally came the big day when I was ready to send my story off to publishers. And publishers are the people that make books. So I sent my story in the mail to several publishers, and I waited because what I learned was publishers get so many stories sent to them that they can't read them all the day they come in the mail. So they open up the envelopes and they put all the stories into a huge pile. It's called a slush pile. And they have lots of slush piles on their desks. And it takes them months and months to get to all the stories. So I waited months and months. And finally, I started getting letters back from the publishers. Now, I was very excited. Some of the letters were smaller letters like this where they would check a box. And I got some where they would write a little note on the bottom. I got bigger letters too. I got different colored letters, all sizes and colors, but all of the letters said the same thing. They all said, no, thank you. We don't want to publish your story into a book. And these are called rejection letters. Well, I was a little disappointed, but not too discouraged because I had heard it takes a while for an author to get a book published. So I wrote a new story, a better story, and I mailed that out to publishers, and I waited months and months, and I got more rejection letters. But I still wasn't ready to give up. And then I got an idea for another story. I mean, a wonderful story. I think it was the best story ever. So I typed it up. I worked really hard. I worked on it for weeks and weeks, and I mailed it off again. And this time, I got more rejection letters. And you know what? This went on for 8 years. 8 long years. All I got was rejection letters. But I didn't give up, and I kept writing new stories and new stories because I discovered that I loved writing stories for children, whether anybody wanted to publish them or not. I still loved it. I couldn't stop. But then one day, after 8 years, I got this other letter in the mail. And this letter was called a contract. And this letter said, yes, we're going to publish your story into a book. And this is the day we're going to do it. And I was so excited, I couldn't believe it. Because have you ever tried to do something and waited for something to happen, but it doesn't happen and it doesn't happen, and you start to think it may never happen? And that's what I was thinking until this one day after 8 years, I got a contract. So this taught me as I work to become an author, a published author, that you can't give up. Sometimes there's some things, if you find something that you really love to do and you really want to do it, you just can't give up. You have to keep working at it. And I'm glad I did. So that's the story of how I became a published author.